right, Alexander, let's talk about Bagram Air Base, and the rumors that are all over the internet, the interwebs, which are saying that the Chinese have moved in. At least that's what the rumors are saying. We don't know. We don't know what's going on, but we do know that we do know that flights are coming in and out of the airfield. We also know that there's a lot of photographs of the airfield at night lit up with floodlights. There's activity there. That there's no doubt about, that there is activity at that airfield. And of course, all the experts are saying that it would be it wouldn't be possible that the Taliban would be able to operate that airfield at this moment in time. So obviously, the first guess is that the Chinese have moved in. There are people that are saying that it's Pakistan. There are people that are saying maybe Turkey, possibly Russia. But everyone's first guess is China. You may want to give some background on Bagram. We've talked about Bagram in the past. That is the airfield that the U.S. left in the middle of the night without notification to anybody. And it was the major reason, one of the big reasons why you had the huge debacle in Afghanistan. But Alexander, what do you think? What's going on in Bagram?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that obviously, just as you correctly said, we don't know. But to anticipate perhaps a little about what we're going to discuss further in this programme, it's been interesting to see that there's been all these speculations that the Chinese are operating Bagram Air Base. And it's also interesting to see that there's been no denials from China that they are operating Bagram Air Base. I mean, I follow the Chinese media very closely. Chinese Foreign Ministry has said nothing about it, nor has the Chinese Defense Ministry, nor has the Chinese media, at least not up to the moment when we are making this program. And you would have expected that if they were not operating Bagram Air Base, they would be saying so, and they would be saying so in clear-cut terms. So that's, just to say that at the outset of this program, obviously a lot more to say, and of course there may be more statements later, but, even the very fact that there has been a delay is suggestive. Now, Bagram is the jewel in the crown in terms of military assets in Afghanistan. It dates from the 1950s. It was first built by the United States. It's the only airfield, by the way, which has received a US president, that president being Dwight Eisenhower, when he visited Afghanistan in the 1950s. He actually flew into Bagram, into the runway at Bagram, which the United States had built. He did not actually fly in through Kabul airport. And that already perhaps signalled what the US's long-term intention was in building Bagram. And then when the Soviets moved into Afghanistan in the 1980s, they made Bagram the pivotal point of their military presence in Afghanistan. There were Soviet troops and Soviet fighter jets and bomber jets all deployed in Bagram, and Bagram was very much the place that they were operating out of. And then when the Soviets left, there was this period when Bagram Air Base was basically left to decay. But then when the US moved in 2001, they again repaired Bagram Air Base. They greatly enlarged it. I mean, they took over the facilities the Soviets had left, but they made them much bigger, and it became one of the major air bases, the major air base of the US in Afghanistan. And that was where the US military was concentrated, where the US air power in Afghanistan was concentrated. It was from there that they basically were running the show, and where the US headquarters were located. So Bagram is, as I said, the most important military asset in Afghanistan. It's got a long history, and it was of such importance that, as our viewers will remember, we were both astonished that the US abandoned it so quickly and so secretly in the run-up to its withdrawal. And we said, and I just want to say, Alex was the first person I know anywhere who said that the most one of the most serious, egregious mistakes the United States made in the run-up to its withdrawal from Afghanistan was to pull out of Bagram Air Base, and to pull out of Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night without even informing the Afghan authorities at that time, the previous authorities, and without taking any real steps to secure the airbase. And that had they retained control of Bagram Air Base right up to the last moment of the withdrawal, as they should have done, that withdrawal from Afghanistan would have been organised much more effectively, and they would have had far greater leverage in negotiating with the Taliban themselves. So Bagram is an absolutely key base. It's built by the US initially, operated by the Soviets, operated by the United States, and now all the indications are that somebody else is running flights from there. There's been some kind of repairs, the lights are on, people can see and hear aircraft moving around, and the drone of jets and all that kind of thing. Now, who could that be? Now, I'm going to say straight away, it seems to me that the most logical parties by far are either China or Pakistan. I don't for a moment think that it's the Russians. I doubt the Russians have categorically ruled out sending any of their military people back into Afghanistan. After all, they had a horrible experience when they were there in the 1980s. And we know that there have been talks between China and the Taliban, over the course of which the Taliban have actually said to the Chinese that they are prepared and would be willing to see the Chinese operating from Bagram Air Base. So, given that China is far more important country and far more useful ultimately to the Taliban, given that they have the means obviously to operate from Bagram Air Base, given that I don't really see why Pakistan would want to be operating from a Bagram Air Base, I'm going to assume, until I know otherwise, that it is the Chinese. And even if it is not the Chinese now, I think it is highly likely that the Chinese will be in Bagram Air Base eventually. They are in deep discussions and conversations with the Taliban, and I think that that's what they're edging to do.
Well, what's the benefit for China to be operating in Bagram? But what's in it for them? And Afghanistan in general, I mean.
Right, well, what is it in it, first of all, for the Taliban? Well, for the Taliban, the military presence of China in Afghanistan gives them that extra layer of security. The United States has recently been talking about over-the-horizon military intervention in Afghanistan, about American drones flying into Afghanistan, carrying out strikes against al-Qaeda leaders, the US supporting various insurgent groups against the Taliban in Afghanistan, all that kind of thing. That becomes far more difficult if there is a Chinese military base in Afghanistan. That means that the United States, if it were to intervene in Afghanistan in that kind of way, would be coming up against China. And that would give the Taliban that extra layer of security. They would feel, in that case, that they have a very powerful external protector, one far more powerful than Pakistan would be, just by way of example. So one could easily see why the Taliban would want the Chinese there. And of course, I would add there's money, because, of course, if the Chinese are operating from Bagram, they will be paying the Taliban money to do it. The Taliban need money. There is no money in the central bank. The economy is in crisis. The government has run out of money. So the Taliban needs money at the moment, and it would get it from China as a result of China being present in Bagram. What do the Chinese gain? I'm going to say straight away what I think they gain. They gain a key strategic asset, a military asset in Central Asia, in an area which is very important to the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the Russians have military bases in Central Asia. They have bases in Kyrgyzstan and in Tajikistan. But the Chinese up to now don't. And from the Chinese point of view, having a base in Central Asia serves a number, comes with a number of advantages. Firstly, it projects Chinese military and political power into Central Asia, and it also gives China a good way of keeping track of what goes on in Central Asia, keeping track, for example, of jihadi groups that might be tempted to attack the Chinese in the Western territories of China. I have to use a euphemism here because YouTube has concerns, which I have to observe, but I think we all know what I mean by the Western territories of China. So it gives the Chinese that advanced warning base, and it also gives them a military presence which enhances their leverage in dealing with situations further south towards the Gulf and in Central Asia as well. So from the Chinese perspective, I could see why Bagram would actually be a useful base for them. And it would also, I would say, give the Chinese an extra point of leverage over India, which is a major adversary or rival, if you like, in this part of the world. So I can see why the Chinese would gain from operating Bagram. I doubt that they would want to go the full way in the way that the Soviets and the Americans did. So I don't expect to see hundreds of Chinese fighter jets and bombers stationed in Bagram. That wouldn't make a great deal of sense. But surveillance aircraft, monitoring aircraft, drones operating out of Bagram, that's a very real possibility. And I can see that the Chinese might see advantages for it, to themselves from it.
What a big win for China. For One Belt, One Road, this connects Iran more into One Belt, One Road as well.
Absolutely.
Doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a stride. Afghanistan is the sort of place in the middle, if you like. So China has good relations with Pakistan. It's got good relations with Iran. It's got good relations with Russia to the north. It's got good relations with the Central Asian states. And now it's going to be able to plant its presence in Afghanistan, which puts it right in the middle of all the communication and transport links that bring all these different parts of Central Asia together and link up the sort of Eurasian region. And of course, Pakistan is an essential component part of the One Belt, One Road initiative. And of course, Afghanistan potentially would be too. So I think that's the benefit to the Chinese of establishing a base there. It would be for them a major geopolitical gain.
Yeah, this was a big piece in the One Road, One Belt puzzle that China apparently has taken. How embarrassing for Joe Biden and for NATO.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an extraordinary embarrassment, and I mean it's beyond belief that Bagram was surrendered so easily. And again, had there been a proper negotiation with the Taliban, perhaps the United States could have agreed with the Taliban, or whatever government was, left behind once the US left, that Bagram would not be used as a base for a country in an adversarial relationship with the United States. Now, that might have been achievable or not achievable, who knows? But no attempt was made. No real thought was given to the importance of Bagram in the overall jigsaw puzzle of Central Asia and the northern tier of the Middle East. It was just given away in the middle of the night. The United States walked out like a thief in the night, abandoned it with a lot of its equipment there. The Afghan government, the then Afghan government, wasn't even told. And now it's very likely that an adversary power has moved into Bagram and is operating Bagram. I should say, by the way, that it is inconceivable that it's the Taliban doing this all by themselves. They definitely do not have the means to do that. I mean, they don't have an air force. They don't have any capacity or need for an air base like this.
My final question is just, I'm just so perplexed. The U.S. generals, the military strategists, the advisors, the think tanks, the billions and trillions of dollars that the U.S. has in these D.C. Strategists and think tanks and this whole apparatus, Chinese experts, China experts, Eurasia experts, One Belt, One Road experts, all these people, they didn't see this coming. They didn't say, you know what, if we don't, as you said, Alexander, yes, we have to leave Afghanistan, but if we don't negotiate with the Afghanistan government or the Taliban that's going to move in, and like you said, make sure that they don't give up these jewels, these crowns in the country over to adversary powers, that it's just going to be, it's going to look so bad. It's going to be such a strategic disaster. They didn't know this. I mean, this is a shock or surprise to anybody.
Well, the answer straightforwardly is you call these people experts. They're not experts. They're ideologues. That's what they really are. I mean, they don't think in these strategic terms. They don't engage in long-term planning. They refuse to talk to the Taliban for essentially ideological reasons for far too long. When they did start talking to the Taliban, they talked to the Taliban from a massive position of disadvantage, because by that point, the Taliban were clearly winning the war. Then, when a deal was done by the previous administration, the new administration, the Biden-Harris administration, walked back on that deal because it was negotiated by the bad orange man, and they didn't work on any of the conditionalities that were involved. And I don't get the impression that anybody in the White House, the National Security Council, or even the Pentagon gave any real thought to Bagram at all. I don't think these people are experts in any true sense of the word. I mean, they may write long pieces in magazines like Foreign Policy and all of that, but I mean, you know, when you actually read them, I mean, they don't come across as being particularly acute and shrewd assessors of the situation in any particular country. They see countries themselves as counters in a chessboard, but they don't really understand things like bases and railways and pipelines and road links and airports and ports and those kind of things. That just doesn't really interest them because, as I said, fundamentally and primarily, they're ideologues. I mean, you know, take a step back and think about what happened with Bagram and how it was abandoned. I mean, you know, we figured out, you were saying, the biggest mistake was giving up Bagram. You know, 2 months later, you know, suddenly it dawns upon them, well, you know, maybe we shouldn't have given up Bagram in quite the way we did. And, you know, the two of us don't pretend to be experts. We're not, you know, part of the expert community. Certainly they wouldn't consider us experts. But there are real experts. There are plenty of people out there who would have been able to give this kind of advice. I know some of them, but they're never, ever consulted. They're never spoken to. They operate in the fringes of the academic world. They write scholarly articles and scholarly books. But the days when governments consulted people like that, well, you have to go back very, very far to see when it happened.
Yeah, well said. So many smart and intelligent people in the United States, but they're marginalized because they're not ideologues. And I'll take a step back, an even further step back, Alexander, and I'll say, going on your point about they don't understand roads and bridges and links and railways and all that stuff and air bases, that's why they put forth a $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill that has pretty much nothing to do with infrastructure and has everything to do with ideology.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. I mean, that's well, I mean, I can't actually add anything to that point, but you're absolutely right. It's exactly the same thing. What is so confounding about it all, what is so frustrating, is of course that the United States was the best at this sort of thing. I mean, once upon a time, the US, I mean, they built Bagram back in the 50s. Just as once upon a time, they built the Panama Canal and the railroads that crisscross America, and they did all sorts of amazing things. I mean, the oil industry in the Gulf was created by American engineers. And the US was brilliant at this sort of thing. And it's allowed that knowledge and that know-how and technique to decay because the focus inside the Beltway has moved onto other things which ultimately don't matter. Now, can I just say, I mean, we talk about China. I want to make it very clear to our viewers, China is not brilliant. They're not, they're not geniuses, but they are purposeful, and they do have people who understand roads, railways, ports, bridges, air bases, that sort of thing. And they listen to them. And that's why the Chinese are able to do infrastructure, and why the US comes up with an infrastructure plan that isn't any sort of infrastructure plan. It's just another ideological, it's a cross between ideological crusade and another, slush fund. I mean, that's what it basically is.
Yeah, I agree. Just yeah, you're right. And there still are so many smart and talented people in the U.S. But
the U.S.
they're not listened to. They're not listened to. Yeah.
The U.S. has an enormous abundance of such people. I mean, it still has brilliant engineers, brilliant academics, brilliant students of all of these countries, people who know the local languages, who understand the traditions, who understand the history. But as I said, they're not listened to, because when they are listened to, they tell things to the ideologues that the ideologues don't want to hear because it's not in conformity with the ideology. So, of course, that means that they have to be excluded, because ideologues never want to listen to what the academic expert community tells them.
All right, we'll leave it there, theduran.locals.com. Please join us there. You will find a link down below. That community is just a wealth of information, Alexander. Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it absolutely, if you want to see experts, I mean, seriously, you will find an enormous amount of expertise and knowledge and insight from our community on locals. No question about it. It's enormously stimulating. We learn lots from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Duran shop, because when you purchase our merchandise, that is also enormously stimulating. When you wear a Duran shirt or mug, or what else you have there? A hat. There you go. You wear the hat, you drink from the mug, Alexander, and well, your geopolitical IQ just skyrockets.
Absolutely, no question.
All right, and definitely the new media platforms, which we always like to talk about and support: BitChute, ODYSEE, Super U, and Rumble. You'll find all our videos there. Take care.